Hello, my name's Dan and I'm a videographer. I've worked with Keith now since 2008, so that's 5 years, and in that time we've produced over 100 films together for YouTube. As I was the very first one to receive a USR, Keith thought it would be a great idea to go over the process, the very first process again, and to highlight all the differences and all the changes that have happened since then. So the very first USR took place round about the 3rd or the 4th week of March 2008. At that time I just divorced from my wife and was going through pain, as you can imagine, and going through some depression as well. I tended to get SAD in the early part of the year, so I wasn't feeling up to par, and I was actually living in a house provided by Keith at the time, so he was actually my landlord. And one day he came around and we spoke together about soul retrieval and retrieving the past. And soul retrieval was something that Keith was interested in for a very long time, but this day came around and for some reason everything fell into place. He asked me to lie on the bed and we would go through an experiment just to see if his shamanic skills were of any use to me in my situation, to ease my pain and my uncomfort. So upstairs we went and I laid down flat on the bed, and Keith got out his drum, started drumming, and it wasn't long before he was in a light trance state, and he went into a kind of a meditation. And because I'm an empath, I can sense things that are happening on a subtle level as well as a real level. And so when the USR, what would turn into the USR eventually, when that was started, I was lying there and I felt what felt like tubes going into the body, into the heart region, into the kidneys, into the liver, and I'd had problems with kidney problems lower down, so I felt like a tube was going in there. And Keith explained that this was a flushing process, and that would flush all the negative energies from my body. It would clear away all the impurities sustained through years of eating red meat and alcohol and nicotine and caffeine. And after that I felt great. It felt like a meditation, and I was a little bit floaty. But when we moved on to the second stage of the process, the entity removal, Keith told me I had an old man stuck inside of me, and that was a parasite which had latched on many years before and was still causing me pain in the present by making me feel worthless and rejected, and I'd put things off and reject things out of hand because this old man parasite wouldn't want me to waste energy. And so I was miserable up to that point, and he got rid of it. The third stage of the USR process was the soul retrieval itself, and I had only a few soul parts to return, maybe just over 100, and Keith used his trance abilities to literally blow the soul parts returned into my heart chakra. He literally blew them in there, and it was a unique experience. I still felt really weird, but kind of floaty, kind of on a different planet. And this continued over the hours afterwards, and at this point this was just an experimentation, just to see if this would work, just to see what it would do, and to use ancient shamanic abilities in the present. What happened was we went downstairs and we put on a film called Night Watch, which was a Russian film made around 2005, and we watched that together. Night Watch is a film about vampires and all the things vampires do in Russia, and I'm not averse to watching horror movies or slasher movies, and in fact most of those I find hilarious because they actually are. You can usually tell who's going to die and why and when, but in this case I felt very disturbed watching this film. After brushing them aside for years and years, I felt very disturbed, like all my emotions were all shaken up for some reason. So I went upstairs and I purged in the bathroom, and when I came down again, felt very mysterious, very weird, but I could also hear a voice inside of my head, and it was a very clear voice. It was almost like my higher self. It was almost like part of me but wasn't part of me. It was like an outside force and yet an inside force at the same time. And so I sat on the sofa communicating with this voice and trying to uphold a conversation with Keith at the same time, and so it was like a three-way conversation at one point. And then after that it was all very weird. I tuned out of reality and tuned into an alternative reality, and I saw images of different things, none of which I can recall at the moment, but it was like I'd slipped into an alternative reality, and I could feel all kinds of different things going on inside, like things were stirring and falling into place, like just like a storm that had come along on the sea and really whipped up those waves and really stirred everything up. And then after the hours and the days that followed, the sea was calmer and calmer, and it eventually turned into a very calm, very still mill pond. And so the effect of the USR was at first mind-blowing. I'd been attuned to Reiki before then. I was a Reiki master, and I'd had a number of other achievements before that date, at the Spiritualist Church and hands-on healing and that kind of thing. And the USR, the very first USR, just felt like 4 times as powerful as the most powerful one of those. And I'm not naive. I can feel energies. I can tell if things are working and if things are not working. And in this case I could definitely tell that things were working on a very deep level, and it really knocked me back. I found I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't, my mind was all over the place. I found it hard to work and communicate and to think about things and to, well, I didn't find a problem relaxing, but my mind was kind of in a fog, in a haze, not just for days afterwards, but maybe even up to a week afterwards. My mind was moving in and out and backwards and forwards, and I found it hard to actually lock on to conversations and really tune into people. And again, driving, I had to exert 150% just to drive a car down the middle of the road, really concentrate on that thing because of the USR, and I didn't attribute it to any other factor. All these things started and ended with the USR. So over the weeks that followed, I got the impression that my outlook had changed. From being a grumpy young man, I became more open and much lighter than I'd felt before. I slept much better. My outlook of the future was much clearer and undaunted by the future, whereas in the past it would have been very daunted by the future. And the main thing was I was unaffected by the past. For years I had struggled with depression and living with the past and living with certain people, and of course the divorce was a massive impact, and all those pressures and all those energies and feelings really subsided noticeably over those few hours and days afterwards. A bit like taking a pill, really. It was so noticeable. It wasn't like I was getting over the past and water was slowly flowing under that bridge as it does. This was a kind of, well, yes, it just felt like energies were coming through, and very subtly, it had to be said, but energies were coming through and revitalising my soul, for want of a better word, subtly, over days, and I felt not only calmer but free of the past, and all those many things that were weighing on my mind as burdens before were now eased to the point where they were insignificant. And I still bore in mind all those things, and all those things still affected me, but over the days, to a less and less degree, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off these shoulders, a huge burden from years before. And part of the USR is to clear the past and past lives, and I felt like things that were still influencing me from past lives, and hence different parts of the body weren't working 100%, the kidneys, the liver, the heart, these things were still being affected by past lives, and I felt the USR just lifted those away, just lifted those pains and those pressures and those feelings, which were obviously must have been attributed to past lives, because as soon as Keith did the operation, the treatment, those things lifted and they weren't a problem any longer. So the USR looked at everything from my past lives to my past current life to my present current life and my future current life. And a knock-on effect of that was I felt very clearly that whereas life before was letting me live life how I wanted to, and if I had something to learn then life would throw me down that avenue, and if I learned it then that was great, and if I didn't learn it I'd have to do it again and again and again and again. But after the USR I felt like life was veering me away from difficult situations, and not like I was avoiding things, but life was carefully manoeuvring me around those things, where before I didn't have a choice in the matter. This time life was really on my side and really helping me to work through things. And I used the opportunity to forgive people from the past. I forgave bullies that bullied me at school, and forgave people that were a problem in my life at that time. And I kind of just cleared up the past. This was just a doorway, and when I walked through that doorway, on the other side there were many things to do. I had to meet Keith halfway. He did half of the treatment and I had to meet him halfway so that I got the benefit from that treatment. I couldn't just sit back and relax and imagine everything was suddenly going to be okay, because it was a 50-50 deal. And so I put in just as much effort from that time on, and work with those energies and work with the past, work with my feelings and my memories. But to say that the influences which had been affecting my life up until that point, to say those influences were decreased and lessened is an understatement. Those things were so insignificant, it was almost like a miracle.